Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Cerrie Burnell, who played Miss Green. Cerrie, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Thank you so much. Miss Green, I think, was only in about 5 episodes of series or season 31, so I'm not sure it's going to be that memorable, but I'm delighted to be joining.
It's brilliant to have you. It really, really is. What we'll do, Cerrie, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode. And if you could tell us how you first got into acting.
Yes, of course. So I'm dyslexic, and
Right.
I think growing up as a child who couldn't read for a long time, I couldn't really read properly until I was 9 or 10.
Right.
I overcompensated by performing. So I got to be really good at drama. I always loved storytelling, narrating things. I would learn things off by heart, paragraphs that my parents had read to me, and go into school day and hold the book up and memorize the paragraph and say, I can read.
Right.
So I think I probably got into it when I was about 6 at primary school. And then when I was 10, I was a member of the Unicorn Theatre, who are a fabulous children's theatre in London. They're still going. They're really community driven, really exceptional work. And I auditioned, to be in a show with them that travelled and went to Germany without my parents. And then, secondary school, I sort of wasn't good at many things, but drama and English were some of the things I was good at. And then I became a sort of life-changing and life-saving, I would say. 15 can be rough for anyone, and to sort of suddenly find your tribe and suddenly feel like, oh, thank goodness, this creative space, this is where I can exist. That was just really empowering, and I absolutely love the National Youth Theatre and would do anything to champion them. And I think the people they find, the young people's lives they affect and change, it's just such a wonderful institution. I did 3 seasons with them. I was really lucky. Again, I got to be like in central London away from my mum and dad. So that also I just love I just loved the whole sort of theatrical experience. Went to drama school after my A-levels, went to Manchester Met, had quite a rough time there. I've got an upper limb difference, so I was born with one hand. And when was I at drama school? Gosh, it would have been late 90s, really super early noughties. And there was very little sort of understanding around disability and how to support someone with a disability. I mean, they did their best, but they came at it from a very sort of authoritarian approach, which was to say, if I didn't wear a prosthetic arm, it's unlikely that I would work. Right. Wow. And I hadn't worn one since I was 9, and I absolutely didn't buckle. I just said that, that's not for me. I don't want to do it. They kept on and on. So in the end, I said, okay, I'm going to do it for one show. I'll do it for one show. And I mean, the whole time I just thought, I don't know what I'm doing this for. I'm just doing this for you, and it's making me feel really shit. Yeah. So after that, not doing it again, and I'm not doing it in my career. And they were like, well, you won't have a career. And I was like, well, we shall see. But I didn't know, of course, I was 21. I didn't know anything, but just my instinct on it was very strong to really reject that and to say no. And I left drama school without an agent, as many young actors do. No agent was interested in me whatsoever. Wow. Terrible, or because I had one hand, we'll never know. And I joined a co-op, which is an actors agency where you, the actor, go in sort of one day a week and help to run the agency.
Right.
And they were called North of Watford, and they were based in Hebden Bridge, and they were as quaint and quirky as you can imagine. I'm not sure I got any work from them, actually. I don't know, but it was still great. And I was just, as you have to be, I was just really, really proactive, and I wrote to everyone and people, and then I went to Brazil actually when I was just after I'd got out of drama school. I went to Brazil, sort of self-funded, and went and did an internship with a Brazilian theatre company called Teatro do Oprimido. I think I might be pronouncing that wrong. Theatre of the Oppressed.
Right.
And it was run by Augusto Boal. And because I then had that as a credit on my CV, I suppose, lots of theatre companies who were interested in foreign theatre, which is a political kind of theatre that, tries to help oppressed people better their situation. Lots of those companies were suddenly like, oh, well, she's got experience in this, so we'll work with her. So then I was able to get work that way.
Yeah.
I then worked with a company who are brilliant, who are a disability-led theatre company in London. They make really global work now. They were responsible for the opening ceremony, or, a big part of the opening ceremony for the Paralympic Games in 2012.
Brilliant.
They're really hot on access. They were, brilliant. They gave me one of my first jobs. It was a schools tour. That wasn't so brilliant, but it was work.
Yeah.
And I was really great. And then it just from writing to people and hounding people, really, I would write letters every single night and send out my headshot and send out my CV, which had about 2 things on it. And it got me somewhere. It didn't get me very far, but it sort of got me, a little way into like what, working in touring theatre, which is brilliant, but it only ever lasts 6 weeks or 3 months. And then you're sort of back to square one. So then when I was about 25, completely skint and, desperately trying to get any job I could, I auditioned for a joint scheme that was being run by the BBC, Channel 4 and the Actors Centre in London. And that was like a training scheme specifically for disabled talent. And I mean, it's a real sort of thorn in your side if you are a disabled actor, that you get sent on so many of these schemes and they often don't lead to paid work.
Right, yeah.
But this was one of the early ones. We hadn't got border schemes at that point, and actually really great. It was really wonderful. There were some excellent people who were on that scheme, who've all gone on to do really amazing things. And I don't think I got direct work from out of it, but I certainly made contacts with casting directors who years later, thought of me for things. So it was really long lasting, and it was a really great thing to do. And then at that point, I got really fed up and I stopped writing letters. I thought, no, I can't keep writing letters all day. Yeah. I'm just losing my life into letters. And so I used the time, instead of writing the letters, and I wrote a play instead.
Brilliant.
Managed to get funding or I think it was sponsorship, to, minimal, to put the play on at the Actors Centre Theatre, the Tristan Bates Theatre in London.
Brilliant, yeah.
And that was called Winged, a Fairy Tale. And that was about a fairy who was born with one wing, which I, of course, played the fairy.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And that was a really lovely experience. And again, I was able to invite a lot of people to come to that. And we did it for a schools audience, and then we did it for an adult audience in the evening. And it was just really, really exciting and really brilliant. And I remember really crying when it was over, just because I was like too many emotions to handle. I was pleased it had happened. I was overwhelmed. I was sad that it had happened, that it was over. And I just remember feeling like, oh my God, I'm too emotional for this situation.
Right.
And then I think shortly after that, because I was working in a school, and I got a phone call from a casting agent who was working in Liverpool, Four Line Pictures, and they were looking for disabled actors, and they were looking to cast a character in the role of head teacher, and they wanted an amputee.
Right.
And I remember I spoke to the guy. So just to clarify, I'm not an amputee. I was born with one hand.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he's not going to know that. But I spoke to him on the phone. He said, "Oh, we're casting this character. He's an amputee. He's in his 50s. At this point, I was 27 and a woman." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's, fine. I'll read for it. What's the character's name?" And he said, "Amputee."
Wow.
"But what's the character's name?" And they were like, "Oh, was the headmaster." And I was like, and I said, "Okay, do you know what? Fine, send me the script and I'll give their character a name. So I think that's the least they deserve." And I read the script, and it was quite harrowingly bad.
Right.
They had done that sort of, it felt very dated. It felt inconsiderate of anyone who was an amputee or had been born with one hand, because all of the gags and all of the jokes and all of the humour was sort of panto-esque.
Yeah.
In the opening scene, the head, well, if I'd done that role, it would have been a woman. The head teacher comes in, shakes hands with the really difficult pupil, steps back from the handshake, and lo and behold, the pupil is left holding a prosthetic arm.
Wow.
All of the dialogue from the kids was around, what happened to Miss, or what happened to Sir? Was it a shark attack? Did they get in a fight? Have they been in prison?
Yeah.
And there was no, it was all a bit snide. There was no sort of education around it, or just acceptance, or shall we not mention it, or have you done your homework? It was this running back. And I just thought, my God, this is terrible. So went to the audition, did the audition sort of as me, as a 27-year-old, if I happened to be a teacher, and changed the script in the audition. Mm-hmm. Because often, casting directors see so many people day in, day out. Sometimes they know the script word for word. Other times they don't. And if you get it slightly wrong, they just think, oh, well, fine. Everything's rolling. Just let her do it.
Yeah.
So I did my version of it, which I like to think was a lot better.
Right,
and then at the end I said, why does the character wear a prosthetic arm? And they said, well, they're an amputee. And I said, how many amputees have you spoken to? Because prosthetics are actually quite cumbersome, quite difficult. There are very few amputees that I know who wear a prosthetic all day. They might wear one for, help in the kitchen. They might wear one, if they're riding a motorbike and they want to be more straight on. They might use one for golf or, whatever. But there's very few people who wear them all day because they're mostly cosmetic and they're heavy and they actually get away rather than help you. And the room went very quiet.
Good.
And everyone looked at each other like, oh, shit. And said, right, well, we'll let you know. And then I remember getting the train home from Liverpool because, the audition had been at Lyme, which is in Liverpool. I'm feeling really sad and thinking, why didn't I just get the job and then speak up? Why did I make myself a target? Here's the difficult disabled person.
Yeah.
The audition. And I remember actually, having a bit of a chat with them, I think before I read, and they were and kind of saying it's quite funny to be reading for a man who's twice my age. And they were like, well, we've not been able to find many amputees in their 50s who are actors. And it's like, well, why do you think that is? It's because people of that, obviously I didn't say this, people of that generation weren't necessarily encouraged to become actors. And also look at the writing.
Yeah.
You're not writing it authentically. You've made us the butt of the joke. There's nothing good going on here. So yeah, I mean, I didn't say that, but that was. And then I had to wait 3 weeks. And I was working at a school, as I
Right.
said. And I remember they happened to phone me on my lunch break. And they said that after what I had said about the character, the headmaster, that whole character had been cut.
Right. Wow.
And they wanted to create a completely new character based on me. And the woman was like, okay, tell me about your life, go. And I had 20 minutes as I was trying to buy a sandwich to quickly, like, you know, I mean, when someone asks you that, you're like, I like oranges, you know, it's really hard. But I just, yeah, I said, I love traveling. I like bright colors. My friends are really important to me. I care about education and, um, everything's being accessible, that kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
from that, they created the character of Miss Green.
Brilliant.
Um, and that decision was made by a guy called Tony Wood, who was the big boss of Line Pictures
Uh-huh.
at the time. And I didn't meet him in the audition, but he was just really instrumental and quite brilliant in modernizing it and making the script really up to date, really inclusive, really forward thinking. And then honestly, it was just one of the best experiences of my entire career. It
Brilliant.
was absolutely enlightening and wonderful. And I mean, the kids were, and some of them have gone on to do, really
Yeah.
amazing. When I see them on screen now, Emily in Paris or something, I'm, oh yes, I knew you when you were 14. And it's, it was just a real hub of talent.
Yeah.
And I mean, the kids were all better than me. I was probably quite over the top, because it was still one of my first TV roles, and I came at it with a very theatrical
Yeah,
passion.
but can I just say there, because you just before you were in Grange Hill, when I've looked at your CV on IMDb, you say
Yeah.
it was one of your first. I always say this. I know it's not the most reliable source of information, IMDb, but you I hate using the term job and actor, but
Oh, it was. Yeah.
it seemed to be the Bill EastEnders Holby City, like
That,
they're
that
big, like they're
be my
massive, yeah, yeah, but still massive programs to be in, as well as Grange Hill.
yeah. Yeah, no, and it's sort of everyone does it at some point. That I suppose that's they're the stepping stones, and
Mhm.
that's really where you learn your craft. And often, as a new actor coming in, it can be a bit daunting. And so, really, it's the other actors and the crew who look after you.
Yeah,
Um, and you take your not just your verbal cue, but you take your cue in terms of how to sort of be from the other actors.
mhm.
Um, and so I was still quite green, I suppose, when I got he was green. um,
Brilliant.
he was really amazing. I remember before we'd even shot any scenes, he was going to some sort of conference at the BBC that was to do with disability, so he did the classic of like, oh, we've got a disabled actress, let's bring her. But he was so charming and so lovely, and he was like, we'll get you a car. I'd never had a car sent for me before, and I was like, yes please, I'll have that. And I spoke at the conference, and then after that, the amount of episodes I was in went up.
Right.
So it was he was just really amazing. And I remember he said to me, you make this role your own, and if there's anything that you don't feel comfortable with, I want you to be able to say. And so really, as well as an actor, I became a script editor for that character
Brilliant.
at that time, and I was sent all of the scripts for the episodes early. So not just my character's dialogue, but all of the dialogues that the other characters had about me when I wasn't in the scene,
Yeah.
to make sure I was their sounding board, to make sure that it was authentic and it was going to be the right pitch for
Yeah.
child friendly audience, or family
Yeah.
friendly. And I was so listened to, and I was so seen and heard and valued. And that since then, really, in my career, I've not had another experience in drama quite like that. They
Wow.
were really ahead of their time. They were
Yeah.
really excellent. Um,
Yeah,
and
because sorry, because for me growing up, like I was 50 a couple of months ago, and for me growing up, the only time you really saw anyone with any disability on kids' television was things like Sesame Street or something like that. There was never, people can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there was never anyone with disabilities shown really on kids' TV. Grange Hill did it in the mid 90s when they brought in the likes of Francesca Martinez and
yeah,
Lisa Hammond and
yeah,
and people like that. But there was still not a huge deal on kids' TV in general. So as you know, as you said there, for Grange Hill to be like not only forward thinking, bringing in a teacher with a disability, but to have you writing the script for it as well, and regarding people's attitudes as
mhm,
well is a huge thing, because one of the first scenes that you were in, I think it might have even been your very first scene. We'll just explain the background there, because BBC, CBeebies or Ofcom or someone had decided that CBeebies should only now cater for under 11s. So like Grange Hill had gone under its own sort of
was 16,
transition
yeah,
as well. And it was in Liverpool. It was series 31, which went on in 2008. And there was always talk around it being the last ever series that they were going on. So there was all that going on. Were you aware of that?
no.
Right.
So that wasn't said. Maybe other cast members who were more familiar with the powers that be would have
Right.
known that. I certainly didn't know that. None of the chaperones that I spoke to, the energy around it was that this would continue,
Right.
and there were other kids who were brought in as new characters
Yeah.
in that series, and their parents certainly didn't know. So
Right. Wow.
it was a really big deal. I mean, obviously, it was a big deal for me, but it's an even bigger deal if you're 11
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're suddenly going to be in Grange Hill.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's life changing.
Yeah.
And and that's not to say that you have to go on to be an actor, but it's an experience outside
Hmm.
the ordinary, to the life you've known up to that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
And it's a huge undertaking to miss that much school and to be in Liverpool when you're not from Liverpool. And
Yeah.
very few of them were from
Hmm.
Liverpool because they wanted the school to feel multicultural.
Yeah.
So there was no, obviously it was set in London originally, but there was no sort of reigning accent. That it was a very mixed
Yeah.
bag in the way that something like Heartstopper is, or Sex Education is now.
Yeah.
It just comes with their own regional
Yeah.
authentic accent.
Yeah.
So even that was forward thinking, really.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
16
And
years ago.
like I said there, because the sort of the age range was changing slightly, and it was going to be catering for under 11s. The characters that were brought in were year 6 children, so they weren't even in the high school. They were children there using the creative learning centre. They were going every possibility they were going to be going to Grange Hill, but Miss Green was their teacher. And the first scene you were in was Miss Green getting all the kids together and taking them to the Creative Learning Centre. But unbeknownst to her, she'd actually stopped a lot of them getting their stuff robbed from Chloe and Andrea, who were like the 2 school bullies at the
Oh,
time.
this is ringing a bell now. This is ringing a bell, but you seem to have a better memory of it
Yeah.
than me.
I've got quite a few notes here.
Okay.
So Chloe and Andrea were like the bullies. They were like year 10s, and they were the bullies of the school, and they were on their way to like the easy targets, basically.
Yeah,
These kids, but then
yeah.
Miss Green got in the way and took them off. And then later on, we then saw Chloe and Andrea talking to 2
About
of the
yeah,
girls. There was Serena, and Megan was another girl. Now, Serena was one of Miss
yeah,
Green's pupils. Megan was a homeschooled pupil, but was still doing bits with these
yes,
kids. And this is when the girls start talking to Serena about Miss Green's disability, and
yeah,
the fact that she has only got one hand. And Serena's like, well, Miss Green's always said it's not a problem for her, so it shouldn't be a problem. I was going to ask you, was that written when you got the part? But obviously, you've written that
Well,
script.
I don't know if I would have written those exact lines, but certainly someone would have written that, and then I would have read it and said,
Right.
"Yes, that's great." Yeah, so I didn't write it. I more edited it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that, and that line, I suppose the lesson is to be courageous in the
Yeah.
audition if you feel like you have the better experience of the written character
Mhm.
than perhaps the person who's written it,
Yeah.
is to speak up, because that would have looked very different if I hadn't said anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing with it was that you saying about, we said about these young kids coming in, and it did show like the point of view of when a 10 and 11-year-old who is on their way to high school, because Miss Green then has a chat with Serena, like they talking about work they'd done previously in school on urban myths, and then she asked Serena about the myth of big school being scary, and I love Serena's reply. You've already shown me that you probably won't remember what it was, but Serena said that big school was as scary as vampire hedgehogs. Was the line that she comes
Oh,
up with?
oh no, I do remember. I do remember that. Yes, no, I do. I do. Yeah,
Brilliant. And when I first got in touch with you, only in 4 episodes, obviously I will interview anyone that's been in Grange Hill, whether it was 1 episode to whatever, 4 episodes. But you were in, like, although you 4 episodes, that like the episodes you were in and the storylines you were in was quite like pivotal. You were quite heavily involved, because there was one where the school was having a talent competition. Don't know
yeah,
if you
and
right?
yeah,
and and for some reason, Miss Green, who wasn't even a teacher at the school,
was it?
was a judge, along with Mr. McDonald and Miss Bethany. And I,
Yeah,
I love it because it was a talent competition for for a trip to Liverpool for the capital of culture celebrations and money for musical instruments. And Miss Green and Mr. McDonald were like quite supportive, when the kids were in auditioning and giving them like, nice positive feedback. Miss Bethany, on the other hand, not so much. So they pointed this out to say, you should be really positive. You should be giving these kids constructive feedback. And then Miss Bethany went completely the opposite way then, and was over positive, over supportive, and just sending all these kids through to the next round without actually talking to the other teachers. I can't remember the actress's name, but she's so good and she was so funny. And I apologize there. And she was just like, as I say, not even talking to the others and just sending them through.
yeah. It was fun. It was really really fun to do. And with the cast members like that, the more concrete cast who
Yeah.
all knew each other really well, they could really play
Mm-hmm.
off each other's energy and off each
Yeah.
other's like that. And as you said, I was in four, maybe 5 episodes, and it was all stuff that was quite well embedded.
Yeah.
So, my belief was that the character was going to come back next season, and everyone was
Right.
kind of saying, "But I mean, this is the life of an actor." You
Yeah.
think, oh, I've
Yeah.
got a sort of a halfway in character who might have a big storyline or who might just be on the periphery, but I'm definitely going to be going up to Liverpool once a year, and then no, the whole thing gets cut. So
Yeah. But like we said, there was sort of like things that you were involved in, because the two girls who you were most on screen with were Serena and Megan. I forget their names.
yeah,
I apologize. And she asked them to interview Tanya, who was obviously a really well established member of the school, played by Kirsten Cassidy, who went on to Coronation Street and
yeah,
loads of other things. And she asked them to interview her for the school website. But when they did, they ended up falling out with each other, trying to upstage each other, and they
yeah.
trying to impress Tanya because she was the head girl, and they just wanted to impress her. So Miss Green spoke to the two girls and found out why they'd fallen out, and she then told them that she'd had a complaint about their behaviour when they were watching the talent show that we were talking about earlier on. And Tanya, the head girl, then arrived and said that they'd been throwing sweets at other pupils and picking their noses and wiping it on other pupils. But this made the girls stick up for each other and say, they hadn't been doing that and just looking out for each other there. And the girls then made up. And we then found out that Miss Green and Tanya had arranged this ruse to get the girls talking because they want,
Really? Oh my,
yeah,
how sneaky. How sneaky.
yeah.
I don't remember that.
And Megan then told Serena that she actually had picked her nose and wiped it on someone, and but thought she'd got away with it. But that's what kids do. And then there was a scene where some year eights had come along to work with Miss Green, and one of them said to her, and this is another time when your
Yeah.
disability was mentioned, he said, "Your arm's quite interesting." And
Yes.
can you remember what Miss Green's
Yeah.
reply was?
Oh my goodness, do I? I remember the scene.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the reply was. What was the
Her
reply?
reply was, "Thanks, so are yours,"
Okay.
which I love.
Yeah.
No, so those things that, like, your character was saying, would they be things that you would have said to people, or you the way you would have acted, like in general, like?
In a school environment where you've got to get on. I mean, I had worked and I have worked in
Mm-hmm.
schools, and of course, you want to explain and be patient and educate. There isn't always time, though. Sometimes you've got to say, yeah, okay, your arms are interesting too. And now we're going to do the object. So everyone get
Yeah,
your pen. You know, sometimes you just have to move things on.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, I mean, the writing may not have been 100% what I would say, but it is a character and
yeah.
it's close enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that would have been, I would have been in complete
Right.
agreement
Yeah.
that.
Right. Okay. And there was a scene where you'd never get away with this now purely because of safeguarding and Martin's law and everything. But there was a scene where there was an old man using the Creative Learning Centre, a guy called Frank.
Yes.
Um, and Miss Green noticed that he kept
Yeah.
staring at one particular girl. And it seemed quite sinister at first why he kept watching this girl and looking over. But then he told Miss Green, he also told Kathy McElroy, who was the manager of the centre, that the girl he was staring at, Rachel, was his granddaughter. And there was this
Yes.
whole storyline about how he'd become estranged from the family for having an affair. And the woman he had an affair with was actually his sister-in-law, and he'd had a
Yeah.
baby and living in Los Angeles and all this. And obviously his family had stopped talking to him. And obviously he wasn't allowed to talk to Rachel at the school, and they asked him to
Yeah.
leave. However, he'd been using like a computer, and it was back in the days of like, MySpace and blogging and
Mhm.
things like that. So his computer was still logged on to his page, and Miss Green, again, this wouldn't happen in day, with safeguarding and stuff. Miss Green showed it to Rachel, the girl, his granddaughter, and
Gee.
asked her what she wanted to do. And the next thing we knew, Miss Green was chasing Frank
Oh,
around in the playground.
yes, I
Yeah,
do. I remember that 'cause I remember we had to keep. I couldn't get the run. You've got to hit certain spots,
right.
so we had to keep doing the run. I remember doing that run about 5 times in the rain. Yes, I
Yeah.
do remember.
Um, and they told him that they needed help with the computer, and then Rachel went to talk to him. Like I say, just in jet, this would never happen. Not just on telly, it wouldn't happen in real life. You know what I mean? The schools opening themselves up to all kinds there, like.
Yeah.
And then Rachel then agreed to talk to her mum about the fact that she'd met her granddad there, and there was another bit where you mentioned the fact that you're dyslexic,
Mhm.
and Serena, the pupil,
Yes.
had dyslexia as well. And we have mentioned Chloe already. Chloe, the bully, she read her poem on the computer and deleted it. And Serena told Alex, and Alex was a character that I've said this so many times. Considering the Liverpool years weren't considered like the zenith of Grange Hill
Yeah.
or its most popular time. The storyline that Alex had been involved in when he was like year 7 and year 8, the bullying storyline of Alex, is the best bullying storyline that Grange Hill did, as far as I'm concerned, in the whole 30 years. And he was now a bully counsellor.
Yes. Yeah.
And because Serena had told Alex, but he was saying, you need to tell someone, and she wouldn't tell Miss Green about it. So Alex decided to hold a bully court, and hold
Yeah.
Chloe accountable for what she'd done. But Chloe wouldn't apologise even under the threat of expulsion. The bully court didn't work. And Miss Green spoke to Alex and said, he'd done the wrong thing, because he made Serena go through all this. But she did say that she wished there was more pupils like Alex around, because obviously he wanted the best for Serena. But that was off the record, she said. So then Miss Green then spoke to Chloe, and this is what I was saying about your character being like heavily involved, because Chloe had been horrible for 4 years. Basically, she was a really, really nasty piece of work. Miss Green spoke to Chloe, and in this conversation, Miss Green made a couple of remarks about her own disability, and then she was saying to Chloe, "Go on, say something," and Chloe wouldn't, and Miss Green asked, if she was scared to say it to her face, and Chloe then said, she asked Chloe what she saw, when she looked at Miss Green, and she said, "I just see a teacher. I'm not going to diss teachers," because she couldn't be bothered doing the detentions. Was her actual answer. And Miss Green said to her, "It's a terrible feeling being singled out for something like that." And Chloe eventually found Serena and apologized in a roundabout way. And it's a really funny scene because it's like, she's mumbling the words. But that scene's really pivotal, I think, because we then found out that Chloe's mum was in a wheelchair. And
Yeah.
all that bullying, I'm not going to say defense mechanism, but it was a way of her coping and getting through the day. It kind of explained why she was the way she was.
Quite a difficult person.
Yeah. And why she didn't say anything to Miss Green about her disability, and hopefully made her
Yes.
realize what she'd been doing to Serena and other kids, which I think was a really powerful thing again for Grange Hill to be showing, not just, oh, this kid's a bully, this is the way they are. The fact that, kids who are bullies or kids are having a rough time in school might have things going on. I'm not excusing bullying in any way, by the way, but it's showing the fact that outside of school, there's someone else as well.
Yeah, and I don't think it was trying to excuse the bullying in any way. I think it
Yeah.
was more showing that people are multi-layered.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't prepared to be mean to Miss Green, because she wouldn't have wanted someone or anyone to be mean about her own mum.
Yeah.
And so perhaps, I don't know, I don't want to read too far into the psychology of it, but maybe she was really defensive because she didn't want people to be mean about her mum, or to frame her mum in a negative light. And so if you get in there first and you're meaner first, then you kind of silence people from the get-go.
Yeah, definitely. And then, as we've said there, Miss Green wasn't seen again after that, and then Grange Hill was cancelled.
Grange Hill was cancelled, and then a woman who looked very similar to her reappeared on CBeebies about 6 months later. Yes.
So let's talk about that transition then. So going from acting to the presenting. I know the presenting's got some elements of acting in, but going from
when it's for preschool, when it's for young children like that, I think there's a very close crossover in the sort of performance side of things. And presenting for kids is really about play, and you do obviously have to be yourself, and to a degree with acting you have to be able to reveal things about yourself, I suppose, whereas with presenting, especially in somewhere as wholesome and colourful and heartwarming as CBeebies, there's more of a mask because you're sort of happy all the time, not in a forced way, but that you're bringing the sunniest part of your personality to the screen. So in a way, it's a different form of acting because you're just acting that one side of your character, which is playful and lovely and rosy cheeked and singing first thing in the morning, that whole thing, which no one really liked that. But it didn't. I mean, actually, what had happened in the space in between that? So I left. So obviously, Grange Hill and all dramas are filmed, unless it's a soap. Everything is filmed at least a month in advance of when it's aired. So Grange Hill was filmed, I think. Gosh, it would have been about 6 months before it aired, something like that. Maybe even longer, maybe 9 months before it aired. And so in between Grange Hill airing and me starting work on CBeebies, I'd had a baby. I had my daughter. So then that was the bigger transition, really, rather than coming to work at CBeebies. I was coming to work at CBeebies as a really tired solo mum. With a very young child. So there were so many things to orchestrate around making that work. I think that was the bigger transition. And also I'd learned about Grange Hill. I'd known that it wasn't returning for about 6 months. So I think I'd sort of said goodbye to it in my head. Even though it was a shame that it wasn't returning, that's what happens all of the time in the life of an actor. So you just sort of move on.
Yeah. Brilliant. You weren't just presenting, because when I was looking through, I loved the fact that you were in the CBeebies Christmas Panto in 2009, Jack and Jill. Because when I was a kid, I used to love programs like that where all like actors and presenters and stuff from different programs would get together. Like, so they used to do like All-Star Record Breakers and stuff like that with Roy Castle. Yeah. That's the biggest thing I can think of there. But I used to love those types of things. So when I looked at the fact that, Chris Jarvis was there and Mr. Tumble's there and all them, they must be great to do when you're all together doing,
It's so much fun. And that, I think they're the thing that I miss, actually, is the panto. So we did those pantos. They started in 2009 and they're still going. Yeah. So we did one every single year. All the way through, played a variety of different roles, and there's nothing else like it. Actually, it's so joyful and so lovely just to be, because it does feel like a family. But obviously, we don't see each other that often. It's kind of day to day because we're all scattered all over the UK. So for everyone to be together and you rehearse, it's quite a quick turnaround. You rehearse it within a couple of days, and then you're performing it for sort of a studio audience, but they're performed in theatres. Yeah. And then you've got a real audience of kids and families who come in. So it's a real panto, but televised. And it's just magical. It's just a really wonderful thing to be part of. Yeah,
brilliant. And then I've got to talk about CBeebies Jump Up and Dance, which is a music video where you sang in.
Yes!
But not only did you get to sing, you also got to dance with Pudsey Bear, Bob the Builder, and Shaun the Sheep. Now, to forget Mr. Tumble and Chris Jarvis, who I've just mentioned earlier on, Bob the Builder and Shaun the Sheep.
I know, and I also choreographed that. So,
wow, really? Brilliant.
Yeah, so Pudsey, that was one of this wonderful woman called Portia, who was then she was one of I think she might have been a runner at that point. She did loads of amazing things in telly, and she was in the Pudsey Bear costume. Bless her heart, having to redo, because those things are so hot. Yeah. She was amazing. And that was loads of fun, actually. And that was, I think, because that was for Children in Need. So Children in Need happens, every year. And they're always looking for ways to involve CBeebies more. And it's bizarre to me that CBeebies isn't more involved, really, because we're, the whole thing is about children. Yeah. And CBeebies, although CBBC is also, really iconic and pivotal within childhood, CBeebies has the bigger viewership and the parental buy-in, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, so it's always a strange one to me that there's not a bigger crossover between CBeebies and Children in Need, or Red Nose Day, those kind of things. Yeah. So was really, really lovely to do that song and to have everyone involved. And all of the animation companies just spent, sort of dedicated their time to donating, like 5 seconds of the characters doing the dance.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing feat to pull off, really.
Yeah.
And it wasn't me who pulled it off; it was the director. But yeah,
But,
it was a wonderful thing
but
to be
you're
part
you're
of.
you're choreographing not only the like Pudsey, but you're choreographing those cartoon characters as well. They need to know from
Yeah,
your dance, like
yeah, yes.
brilliant. And there was another thing. I assume it was like a talking heads type thing. Are you having a laugh about TV and disability?
Oh, that
And
was years later, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
about how disability has been shown on British TV, which I mean that was I've got 2010 down. The fact that they waited until 2010 to show something like that when Grange Hill had, I say, characters 15 years
I
earlier, and
know.
there was
Yeah.
probably other things, but I just think it was great that we were finally getting these things
A
about
really
it,
honest
yeah,
conversation
and
in a
into
positive
the
light.
fact that these people are getting integrated onto television and as you said there, shown in a positive light. Another thing, another thing I want to talk to you about is Waverloo, because
Okay.
only because Waverloo. If anyone's never seen Waverloo,
Very
if you're
tricky.
ever having a bad day, you
It's
need to
very tricky.
yeah, watch Waverloo just because it'll just chill you out so much.
It
I
will.
think, yeah, like I think because we haven't got kids, but I've got nephews and a niece, and when they were younger, if Waverloo was on, it was very hard to stay awake sometimes with them if they put Waverloo on because this is great. This so like, but I love that one.
It's very soothing for sure.
Yeah, and we talked about the presenting, CBeebies House and CBeebies Adventures. You did tons of them, didn't you?
Yeah, I was in the CBeebies house for about 8 years,
Wow.
and then during that time did other little things, and then in the end, the reason I left really was to do with geography. All of my family's London based, and
Right.
my daughter was going to be starting school, and it was just too much of a juggle to be. Well, I mean, she did start school, and we were commuting. I would be commuting up from London, and just too many things in the
Yeah.
mix. And I'd also started writing children's books by that point.
Right.
And
Brilliant.
then when I did leave, it sort of opened up the door for doing other bits of work, other bits of presenting. I did a small stint on Doctors.
Yeah.
And some of the casting team who called me in to read, I'd met at the BBC Talent Fund scheme that I'd done when I was 25.
Right.
15 years earlier. So sometimes doing those schemes and those funded courses or training does really help, and it can be a really long-lasting relationship and really wonderful. Yeah, and then I just sort of more drifted into, the pandemic happened, all of that. I sort of more drifted into writing now and having a South base. So most of my work, although I do still travel, a lot as an author, but there's more of an element of control, I think, when you're based in one place rather than two or three different cities.
Yeah. Right. And you're writing. Have you got anything coming up that you want to plug right now? Free advert for you.
Yeah, certainly. So, well, the book that's going to be the next book to come out is coming out in the summer, and that is called The Princess and the Thief.
Right.
And that is like a retelling of a classic fairy tale. And the one that most people will know it from is it's a Barbie film, a horrendous Barbie film,
Right.
called Barbie, the Princess and the Pauper. So for anyone who loves fairy tales, who loves strong female characters, and both of my sort of heroines in the story have an upper limb difference, and that's why they are confused.
Right.
That's why they're able to swap places. The thief can swap places with the princess.
Right.
It's all set in Italy. It's very romantic. It's very magical. It's aimed at sort of early teen. It's called clean teen, which is where there's no sex, but there's
Right,
lots of
okay.
romance and yearning and crushes and kisses.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, that comes out in the summer, and I'm doing the final touches at the moment, and then I'm pitching other things, and I have other things coming out which I can't talk about yet.
All right, okay. Okay. Now, just before we come towards the end, there was something I noticed you another talking heads one, which was when kids TV goes horribly wrong. And
Oh
I
yes,
just wanted
yeah,
to know
yeah.
if you were on that because
I
of something that
was.
had happened with you, or were you just there because you were you were a presenter?
Well, both really.
Oh,
So
right, okay.
it was to do with the press reaction. So when I first started CBeebies, about 6 weeks in, there were loads of message boards, anonymous message boards, kind of similar to Mumsnet, but that were BBC based. And lots of parents were very uncomfortable with a presenter having one hand,
Wow.
with there being no explanation given for it. So I just sort of rocked up in the CBeebies house one day and was talking about, having a magical cup of tea. And let's open the cupboard and see where it leads. And there was no, because, none of the other presenters turned up and said, hello, I'm Alex, I'm Welsh. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? There was no, we didn't talk about who anyone was, where they were from. They just magically appeared and lived their best enchanted CBeebies life. So we stuck to that for me as well. And I think that is so valid and so important, because so often the disabled person is made to explain, oh, hello, I've got one hand, here's why. And whilst, you know, education is empowering and all of those things, if it's not the way that things are done, then you don't need to
Yeah.
do that just for the disabled person. So it was really great that they didn't do that, and that I was just allowed to do my job and just exist as I was.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, that some parents weren't happy with that and they complained, and then the Daily Mail found out, got hold of it, and then they sort of blew it all out of the water. And I was doorstepped. I had journalists turning up sort of
Wow.
10 o'clock at night saying, oh, what are your thoughts? Can we talk to you? All of that kind of thing. And I was actually very happy to talk about it. And I said, well, this is the prejudice that does exist
Mm-hmm.
and it lurks within our society, but it's often not voiced. And, it's really not personal to me. It's anyone with a disability that would make those parents uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the reaction that we're getting. So anyone with one hand, stepping into the spotlight like that on a children's channel would have got that reaction.
Yeah.
And actually, the way you combat it is to have the conversation and then to invite in more positive representation. And things have changed so much since that time. There are so many more actors now who are sadly better than me, who have the same disability as me, that are going to go on to do far more fabulous work than I have done to date, because
Yeah.
the door has been opened, and someone would have opened it. It just so happened that on this occasion it was me.
Yeah.
And that sort of having me on CBeebies in that really visible role in people's living rooms, 8 hours a day, really changed
Yeah.
the possibility for
Yeah.
actors with an upper limb difference. And now, there are so many wonderful, there's a whole community of brilliant actors with an upper limb difference. One of my gorgeous friends, Melissa Johns, who looks quite similar to me. she's 10 years younger than me, so I always take it as a huge compliment if someone confuses me for her. And she's had it the other way. She's had people coming up to her saying, were you on CBeebies? She's like, no, that wasn't me.
Right.
But you don't realize, I suppose I didn't realize when I took the job on CBeebies, how that would sort of echo down the line, and how it would be an opportunity for lots of people, not
Yeah.
just for me. And how actually, having that conversation and not shying away from it, and not, so often I was asked, like, well, are you hurt? And it's like, well, I've grown up with one hand. I've heard it before.
Yeah.
It's not new news to me. And also, it's sort of irrelevant. Let's just talk about why it's happening and move on from it.
Yeah.
It's really not personal to me at all. So, I suppose if someone is sexist to me, it's not hurtful. It might be annoying, but it's not personal.
No.
It's that person doesn't like women. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's in that moment, it's kind of the same thing.
I mean, to me, it just seems incredible that people would have been saying that, because if you think about, like, Adi Adepitan is there on
Yes.
television in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
No one's saying, "Oh, he's on television. He's in a wheelchair. He shouldn't be." Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, there's no explanation for that. Like,
No, but
you know?
I think someone being in a wheelchair but appearing to have all of their limbs,
Yeah.
we've seen for decades.
Right. Yeah.
We've seen that kind of representation a lot through sports, through music, through, cultural events. Someone having one hand can be particularly triggering because we haven't seen that. Up
Yeah.
until that
I
point, we
yeah.
hadn't seen it. And now we are seeing it a lot more. And, it might be the focus of the drama or it might not. Both are really valid. But up until that point, we hadn't seen it. And also remember, parents are really particular.
Yeah.
And some children are scared of new things. They are, some children are scared of the dark. They're scared of spiders.
Yeah.
They're scared of dogs. It doesn't mean that you then say, I never want to see a dog again.
Yeah.
You just explain, in my case, you would explain about the disability and everyone would move on.
Yeah, completely agree there. Yeah. Okay. Well, we are coming towards the end of the interview, Kerry, and I have got the same few questions that I always ask at the end, and they are all Grange Hill related. Now,
Okay.
I didn't ask you this earlier on, but were you a fan of Grange Hill?
Growing up, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a completely different cast.
Yeah.
I was watching it in the 80s, and hilariously, I didn't have a television growing up.
Wow. Right.
Which is
Okay.
probably why I went into children's television. But so I would watch it at friends' house, at my cousin's house, and I felt like I was really grown up if I got to see an episode of Grange Hill.
Brilliant.
Because it was so cutting edge in the 80s and early 90s. It was amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so over the last couple of years, there's been talk of a Grange Hill movie in the works. Phil Redmond's written it. Sarah Sugarman's on board. Kellen Jones, who played Mr. Green in the early Liverpool years, he's on board as well. We haven't heard anything for a couple of years.
I haven't heard anything either, and I'm not sure Miss Green would be returning.
Well, what do you think of the idea of a movie?
I mean, it's kind of a done thing now for series that are really successful. I think let's take another show that's just happened for. So The Summer I Turned Pretty, which is just absolutely adorable, and I love it. And now they've announced that the cast are going to do a movie, but I think that's you can see why they've gone in that direction because they've got such a huge fan buy-in. With Grange Hill, I could see that really working, but it was such a long-reaching show. You're talking 31 years. I think it really depends which era and how you would do it. I mean, I think it would. I could see it being really successful, I suppose, for certain people. Do you see what I mean? Like, I don't know which era they're thinking, but I guess whichever era they pick, and it would probably be the London years, I would assume, because they're that's sort of the iconic time frame that it's mostly known for. I can't imagine how they would do it because they'll all be adults. But I guess it could be really successful.
Yeah. Okay. And like you just said there, you don't think Miss Green would be asked, but if you were asked, would we see a return of Miss Green?
Absolutely, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, and you've said there that you'd been a fan of Grange Hill growing up. So, who was your favourite character?
I don't know because I would have seen it I never got to see a whole storyline, and I would have just seen it in snapshots at different friends' houses. So I don't know if I had I don't think I had a favourite character
Right.
per se. I just loved the energy of it. And I just felt like I wanted to go there, like I wanted to
Yeah.
be those people. And I felt hopeful that because so the time I would have watched it would have been, kind of age 10, 11, 12. And I would have been really hopeful that my life would have been that cool.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So this is where I would normally ask, if you couldn't have played Miss Green, which other character would you like to have played? But if you don't know the characters, that's quite a difficult one to answer as well. Or is it?
I would have only wanted to play Miss Green
Right.
because it's such a huge privilege to have a script written for you.
Mhm.
When else does that happen? It was just amazing that came to be. And yeah, it was such a positive and uplifting experience that I can't imagine it ever being any better than that. And to this day, it's one of the best experiences I've ever had on
Brilliant.
television.
Brilliant. Okay. And so then the final question then, Kerry, is why do you think there's still such affection for Grange Hill?
Because it dealt with subjects that were quite difficult and were really real.
Yeah.
And it didn't shy away from hard conversations or from showing how brutal secondary school, high school can actually be.
Yeah.
And it was very nuanced and very clever and quite compassionate in its writing, so that you were always on the side of the child, even if they were a bully or even if they were, doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I just think there's nothing else like it, really.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, Kerry, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your time, not just on Grange Hill, not just your experiences in the industry, but also your disability as well. I think that's been really important that we've talked about that as well. So, yeah, so thank you so much. We have been besieged by technical difficulties throughout this interview. Those of you listening won't know because I'll hopefully have edited them all out, but we have been besieged by technical difficulties throughout this one.
And cats
And cats and
children breaking plates. And yes.
But honestly, thank you so much for coming on. It has been great talking to you. It's been really, really good.
It's been my pleasure. It's been a
Oh,
delight.
no, thank you so much. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye bye.